The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report, and today we have a true intellect, one of the greatest in the United States, probably Italy too. We'll bring him over there sometime. I'm sure he goes there a lot. It's Mario Cuomo, and last time we did a show, we got an enormous feedback, and basically what we really spoke about last time was theology, which both of us enjoy. Mario, I'm into Jewish history now, and I've been reading I've read 4,000 pages of Jewish history. And I'm finding a lot of things make me a little bit nervous because it's all about wars and profits, and the world doesn't seem to change much. You got a better history on your side?
I don't think so. Just look at our own time. We don't appear to have made much progress. We have a president now who's very popular because he won 2 wars, or at least what people thought were 2 wars, one against the Taliban and one against the Iraqi forces, what was left of them. They couldn't put a kite up to stop a missile, but, so you win 2 wars and the place cheers. We have a war in Grenada. We beat 44 guys in sneakers.
Ronald Reagan, right? He attacked the medical school.
Right, and everybody cheers. So war is the thing. I mean, in your lifetime, my lifetime, Second World War, Korea, it goes on and on and on. So, and you wonder, how much have we learned with all this technology and all the sophistication and all the capacity we have for gathering wealth, and we still can't figure out how to stop killing one another. It's extraordinary.
Do you believe that the problems that we have with the Muslims today, at least the right-wing fanatical Muslims, stems from the fact that 500-600 years ago they were displaced sort of as the world leaders? Do you believe that?
I think there are probably a whole lot of causes, and you could talk about them endlessly. I think religion has something to do with it. There's no question about that. I don't think the Quran, fairly read, promotes suicide bombers in Israel or anywhere else. But I think the Islamists, the people who have distorted the Quran, a considerable number of them, but not most Muslims, they're in madrasas being taught that jihad, holy jihad, is killing the Western religious people, and because they are infidels. I mean, that's what they're being taught. Now, that's not the truth, but that's what they're being taught, and Saudi Arabians are participating in that and providing money for it. So that's part of it. Another part of it, I guess, is what creates crime in a ghetto in New York or anywhere in the United States? Ignorance, oppression, lack of opportunity. They have a lot of that in the Middle East too. So there are 2 bunches of causes there: religion plus the social conditions. And to get at the problem of terrorism, especially suicide bombers, you'd have to deal with those 2 causes. We're not doing that. What we're doing is trying to kill terrorists. Great, you have to do that too. You've got to catch them and destroy them. But this is a perverse kind of cancer. When you extirpate one of these cancerous tumors, so Osama or Hussein or anybody else, it produces more tumors immediately. That's what Sharon is running into. You kill a terrorist, and it produces more suicide bombers. So eventually you have to get to the source of this. And that's the madrasas, the religious distortions. You have to correct that, and they have to start doing it in the Arab world, and we need the help of the Arabs to do it. And the other thing is the oppression, etc. There's a final thought on that. Palestine. You want to sell a Palestinian state? Wouldn't it be helpful if you developed their economy a little bit? If you at least built some roads and bridges and factories and let them know, look, this isn't going to be just a thing we call a state without an army. that has land in Gaza and land on the West Bank and no economy. We're going to give you something meaningful, something that shows that you can make the desert bloom the way the Israelis have. See, those are the things I think we should be doing, that all we're doing is...
You know what a fatwa is?
Yeah. A decree.
A decree by usually a clergy person,
Right.
a clergyman or clergywoman, and Fridays they go to the mosque,
Right.
and they come out with these fatwas. And these people basically are poor and they're impoverished, so they're listening to these clerics. It's my theory, and I've been involved in the Middle East a long time, if we're talking about Middle East, that it's all with the clergy. Unless you get the clergy to stop giving a very fundamental understanding which suits their ability, or what they think is their ability, I don't see how you get peace in the Middle East. I just don't see it. The rabbis yesterday, 500 rabbis came out, we'll call it a Jewish fatwa, saying that a government that gives away land is a violation of the Torah. This to Sharon is impossible. I mean, what they're doing is saying that the government, the duly elected government, is not strong enough to overcome their rendition or their impression of what the Torah says. And that's dangerous. And yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but Sharon's security has been pumped up tremendously. There's feelings in Israel that he could be the victim of an assassination like Yitzhak Rabin. And that's very, very scary. I'm not talking about the roadmap, we'll get into that in a minute. But you know what clergy is, you and I, we follow the rabbis and we follow the priest and then the apostles, etc. How do you overcome this? What creates this rigid interpretation of words, of Scripture? What does that? Is it
error.
ego? Is it I'm not sure of error.
Well,
is it power?
Let's take it a step at a time. Can religion be dangerous when you use it as an instrumentality of public policy in a place, especially in a place that is pluralist, which is to say, they're not all people who believe in the same religion? Right. And the answer is, of course.
Or the same interpretation.
That's right. Now, and can it be a source of evil? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a Christian. I can't think of a parallel in the Jewish community. Maybe you can, but we had the Crusades. We had popes who were mad. We had popes who were murderers. We had popes who encouraged jihads against the Muslims and who burned them and ate them. Now, this I haven't forgotten from the history books, and I'm sure that there are a lot of Muslim people who haven't forgotten it either. That was all in the name of religion. That's not my religion. It was in the name of my religion, but it is not Christianity as I understand it. Christianity as I understand it is the same essentially as Judaism. Two principles, tzedakah and tikkun olam. I'm supposed to love you, you're supposed to love me because we're both children of the same God, even if I am better looking than you.
But you have the Messiah first.
And the second is, and what we're supposed to do is make the world better together, which you've done a great job of. And I tried a little bit too. Those are the two stripes. But those are the two rules. That's Judaism, that's Christianity. But the popes who were distorted in their view, like the Muslim clergy that's distorted in its view,
All
can
the
do
Jewish.
great. Well, see, I don't know, really. I'm trying to think in Jewish history. Now, you just finished reading 4,000 pages.
The assassination of Yitzhak Rabin.
That's one Jew. See, that's
Well,
one zealot who goes wild.
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is the people who were running the religion, who were in the position of power. See, you don't have a bureaucracy.
We don't have a centralized.
And that may have been your salvation.
What we have, and what's interesting, is rabbinic Judaism. Judaism basically was geared to Israel, which was the temple. When the temple was destroyed by the Romans, what happened was that the synagogue, which is a Greek word, became the temples all over the world. And rabbis took control of it. So you had many, many different rabbis giving many, many different interpretations. And you had some wonderful, obviously scholarly people. And rabbinic Judaism is a commentary on the scriptures. And then you get into the Talmud, the Mishnah and the Talmud. I don't want to give a Bible lesson here, but it's really interesting. And you have 30,000 different interpretations in the Talmud. Now, to me, one of the greatest Jews ever was Maimonides. Most of those Jews in those days, by the way, interesting, were doctors. They were healers. Maimonides had a son who became a brilliant Kabbalist, which was directly against, in a sense, his father. Maimonides is a rationalist. So you had the son bringing in the Kabbalah, and when you get into Kabbalah, it's hard to come down to earth because it's all up there. You know, you're flying with Kabbalah. It's mysticism.
Did Maimonides have a nickname?
Rambam.
Rambam. You know what Rambam's ladder is?
No.
The philanthropic ladder. You know, the
Oh,
8
sure.
steps.
Yeah, the 8 steps. Sure.
Yeah, no, Jewish history is terrific. There's a great new book, Rambam's Ladder, that's out. You ought to read it.
The
All
degrees
about
of
philanthropy.
charity.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you know, getting back to the basic question, how much of the problem is religion today? I think almost everybody who is a creditable expert, if you will, on the Middle East will say that part of the problem is the distortion of Islam and this new name they apply to it, Islamists, one who distorts. Now, I don't know what the derivation is exactly, but it's such a well-known phenomenon that it's achieved a name. And Tom Friedman writes about it frequently. People, the Saudi Arabians, give money to people in madrasas who teach the jihad, which is war against the West. And so that is definitely one of the problems. But another one of the, and the memory of the Crusades is what creates alienation, I think, against Christians. But also the economic conditions, I think, have to have something to do with it. And a feeling in the Arab world that, you know, why are we all left behind? Here are the Israelis, they come, they take this desert, and before you know it, they're leading in technology, they're doing great. You know, there has to be a little bit of the jealousy factor at work too, I think.
Okay, but Israel built it with its own hands.
Absolutely.
The greatest, I don't know, have you been in Cairo?
No, I've not.
If you take a plane from Cairo, which is the oldest civilization, one of them in the world, and you go to Tel Aviv, it's about 45 minutes. It's unbelievable. It's like you're going into a new world. You're going from the Western world to from an old Eastern, Middle Eastern world, and the depravity and the poorness and the people who are out of work in Cairo is unbelievable, and the birth rate keeps going on and on. It's a miracle that Mubarak has kept that place together. It really is.
Let me ask you, may I ask you a
Sure.
question? Is that allowed here?
Absolutely.
Okay. The people who settled Israel and who have built Israel,
Right.
you know, amazing achievement with all the oppression, with all the wars they've had to fight and win. But the people on the other side, the Palestinians would say, or some of them would say, or a lot of them would say, look, they had the United States helping them. And of course, they did. We were there to start it. Truman was there. And we've given money over the years. It used to be $3 billion a year until Bibi said he didn't want any more. But still pretty much, I guess.
They take. Bibi is now finance minister. He's ready to take.
And now he's taking it.
He's taking
yeah.
it.
And so we did help, and we did give them, allow them to buy defense materials from us, and we supported them. Okay. And the Palestinians say, well, see, that's unfair. Why shouldn't we get the Western world now to support the Palestinians? Not by making them aggressive battlers with the Israelis, but in their economy. Why can't we say to them now, look, in addition to making you a state, we're going to invest in you a lot of money, as long as you don't rip us off. And we're going to have to be very careful about that, because a lot of times we give money and it winds up in some Swiss bank. But we want to make sure, and we're going to build roads. We'll start right now while you're still arguing. We want to show you that we're serious about you having an economy. Perez used to talk about a Middle Eastern free trade zone.
Right.
Now Bush is talking about a trade. That's wonderful, but let's show you how it's going to be real. You're going to be a state with schools, we're going to build buildings. With roads, we're going to give you roads. With factories, we're going to give you factories. Right now we'll start, but we'll put it in the ground so you can walk on it, feel it, know we're serious. With our money, we will do it.
Okay.
Why not?
You want to know the problem?
Please.
The problem is that Abu Mazen is now the prime minister of the Palestinian Authority, and he's got about a 2 or 3% popularity. Yasser Arafat, who is a condemned character of ill repute, if you gave him money, it would go into his bank account. He refuses to open it up. Who do you think the Europeans are backing now? Yasser Arafat. There's a play here against the United States that's horrible. When the Israelis want to talk and move and bring up Abu Mazen, Arafat comes into the play. Even now, when they're negotiating this alleged ceasefire, Arafat is the guy that's doing it. He's dethroning Abu Mazen.
All right, so put the money in a pot, put it in an authority, put Leon Charney on it for the United States, put somebody there from the European Union, somebody from the United Nations. You dole out the money. Have monitors that do it. Don't put it in the hands of the local politicians.
Well, but they have a very good finance minister now. He used to work at the World Bank. He's American educated. He is literally trying to do that. We don't know how successful he can be because there are a lot of goons and people who really follow Arafat who get paid by him. You know, the payroll, the army, the whatever they are, they all get paid by him. So your theory is absolutely correct. I was with Shimon Peres about 5-6 weeks ago when he was telling me how it is to reach 80. He's got a great phrase. He says there's three situations in life. You're young, you're middle life, and you don't look too bad now. You're looking pretty good, which means you're 80 years old and you're surviving. And at that time, it was before Mitzner, who's the leader of the Labor Party, resigned. So we were at the Intercontinental here in New York, and he said, Leon, I got 2 hours to kill. What are you doing? I said, oh, come, we'll talk. And he was just talking about how he wants to make peace, exactly what you're saying. Yeah. He wants to develop the economics there. He wants a grand Marshall Plan for the Palestinians.
Absolutely.
He spends time, but in Israel, he's unpopular because he's doing this. He's terribly unpopular.
That's too bad.
The first election he won was that he became the interim party chairman for 1 year, and he had to agree that he wouldn't stay longer than 1 year, which is nonsense, because if he's good out there, he's going to stay. But the man was creeping around. He's in good shape. He's 80 years old, but he said, Leon, I've had my day. It's good. It's nice. I'm in the Knesset. I do what I want for peace. 2 weeks later, he's chairman of the Labor Party, which is a great hope, in my opinion, for Israel. There are a lot of people who don't believe that, but he is the most sensible, articulate politician there who is really espousing a peace plan.
Good man. Can I give you an example of a place where we're doing it wrong?
Sure.
Iraq. Now, I said this this last week on an NPR show called Marketplace, and it's just 300 words. And it got all kinds of feedback because people hadn't heard this before. We're in Iraq now. We are in charge of Iraq. We keep even the British at some distance, although they're our allies or were our allies. The Germans and the French we kept out altogether. And in that period, while we were exclusively in charge, we brought in Halliburton, Bechtel, Perini, the contractors, and we made contracts. Now, you're a very good lawyer. Who's the payor in these contracts? $100 billion who's going to pay, right? There's no government of Iraq, and so what they're saying is, well, Iraq is going to pay when the government comes in. Okay, how much? $100 billion. To whom? Our contractors. For what work? We'll tell them what work. Who's going to verify the work? We're going to verify the work. What if we didn't want that work? Too late. It's done. You have to pay $100 billion. Now, since you won't have the cash because you have $400 billion in debt already, you need $28 billion to repair your oil wells.
Write bonds.
Since we're going to make you a democracy, at least a democracy light, you're going to need schools and clinics and roads and housing. Because you're not going to have the money, we're going to securitize that obligation, which is going to make it what? $200 billion, which will
sell
be
it to Wall Street.
That's exactly right, with bonds.
With a U.S. guarantee.
Now, so at one point, Leon, we are going to announce to the new Iraqi government, here's $200 billion worth of obligation because we're liberators. What do you think is going to happen then? They'll say, well, we always suspected why you started this war. We know that the Israelis were happy about it for their own reasons, but you started it because you got economic benefit. Now, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying that's their fear.
That's their argument.
And this will be support for that fear. Don't you think so?
Sure. I think what I don't understand. I know you were against the war initially. I remember on the show you talked about it here.
Right. I thought they should have tried the 3 more weeks at least. 3 more weeks of diplomacy. It wasn't a question of being against getting rid of Saddam, but if you had tried it for 3 more weeks and had been able to bring everybody together, then maybe you could have done it without destroying Baghdad and without losing thousands of Iraqis who were innocent and hundreds of Americans who were innocent and British people. That was my position and the position of a lot of people.
All right, we're going to hold for a break. We'll come back with Mario Cuomo. This is deep thought, and it's provoking for everybody, including me, so don't leave us.
The Leon Charney Report congratulates the team of BDC, The Price of Peace, and Leon Charney on the New York Emmy Awards win. The documentary reveals the true story of the negotiations leading up to the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time, the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt. Watch it on Hulu.com or buy the special feature edition DVD at select stores.
Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the Mystery of the Kaddish. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD in Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Mole Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs in Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.
We're back with Mario Cuomo. We ought to talk to him about these latest Supreme Court rulings, especially affirmative action. He could have been on the seat. He didn't want to go. If I were he, I'd do the same thing. It would be hard for me to sit on a court all the time.
You couldn't afford it, John.
It's a tough bag to sit on a court all the time. You don't regret that, do you?
No. I mean, look, it would have been a great honor, as you know, to be on the Supreme Court. I mean, for you, for me, for any of us who's a lawyer. I mean, what's better than that? But then you would have had to give up speaking on Israel, speaking on all these political subjects. I spent 20 years in public life, 12 years as governor, learning all about the socio-cultural problems, the economic problems, and racial problems, etc. And not to be able to speak on those, because I was a judge who was going to look at 75 cases a year for the rest of my life. I couldn't see that as a...
Did you read this new opinion on affirmative action? Have you studied it?
Well, enough so that I think I understand what they did and I'm approving of it. I think it was very interesting. There are two, I guess, basic rationales for affirmative action. One would be I discriminated against you because I enslaved your people for a couple hundred years and you happen to be an African American and I think I owe you something, so I'm going to make it easier on you to do this or do that. So a fairness, a compensation rationale. I think that's where it started, basically. That was the idea in the very beginning. I think Americans don't like that because they say, I didn't do it, so I'm not the one, so why should I pay the price?
And there is even someone who want reparations.
Right, so the compensation rationale is not as strong now as it was. The second rationale is different. The second rationale is it's not compensation because we owe you, it's diversity because you're good for us.
That's the better argument.
Well, that's what they accepted, and it works better in this society. Ironically, the president who opposed the affirmative action apparently forgot about his own military schools, like Annapolis and West Point and the Air Force Academy, all of whom use aggressive affirmative action programs to make sure that their armed forces, their candidates, are black and Asian.
And they all
whatever.
came out for it, Schwarzkopf, everybody.
They had to. And so what were you going to say to them? You know, you're unconstitutional in the way you're putting together our armed forces. So what succeeded was diversity, not by a big margin. You replace O'Connor now with
5-4,
one more Scalia or Thomas, and it goes the other way. And that's why the Supreme Court is so important, the choices, but depending on who steps down.
I think the rumor is Rehnquist is going down, going to retire. Did you hear that?
Yeah, well then you can replace Rehnquist. I hate to make the invitation, but you can replace Rehnquist with a conservative and still not change the court.
Right.
And unless he replaces Rehnquist and makes Scalia the chief, of the Supreme Court, that would be a problem for us because he's very, very strong and very great intellectually and very conservative.
You know him at all?
Oh yeah, I've met him. He's a brilliant guy and a very nice guy, except for when he has to decide a case. Especially if it involves.
It happens to be his business scenario. He's not exactly a waiter at Sardi's,
So he's nice when he's not deciding. I mean, I
But he's a brilliant guy.
Very smart, yes.
Are you worried about the court?
I am indeed, because what you can do with the court now is what you failed to do with our constitutional system. So you don't like Roe against Wade. You don't like the idea that women have a limited, and it is only a limited, choice over their abortion possibilities. You don't like it. Okay, so make a law, change the Constitution. Well, we can't do that because too many people disagree with us. So we can do it by putting a judge on the court who can, with a single vote added to the votes that you already have, accomplish things that you can't get accomplished in the congressional or constitutional process the way it was designed. And so things that you can't achieve by getting enough people to agree with you, you get 1 or 2 judges to do it, 5 judges out of 9, and you get it done. That's what I don't like about it, and that's the danger here. They can get rid of rights. They can get rid of rights in the Bill of Rights by just changing definitions and changing interpretations.
But we're miles ahead. We are miles ahead of Israel. Israel has no constitution. My friend just became the Speaker of the Knesset. His name is Ruby Rivlin. He's been on his show many times. Very, very close friend, very close to Sharon. He's challenging the Supreme Court there every day. And he says to me, at the end of the day, anything they decide and we don't like, we pass a law the other way. There is no constitution. There is a thing called the Basic Law. Israel is inundated with Turkish law, civil law, all kinds of different laws. The Turks, you have to follow that for the real estate because they controlled the country at one time. The common law, the English law, because the Brits were there. You have also Napoleonic law for some reason. It's over there. So you go meshug, as we say. And the Knesset there is powerful, more powerful, and it's very dangerous, by the way, because you must give teeth to the Supreme Court. They are the last. On the other hand, Aaron Barak, who's a great justice, has been criticized that he is like a one-man constitution, because what he's trying to do is base his foundations of his opinions on American law and maybe British law. It's interesting, by the way, the Brits don't have a constitution either, right?
Here's something that's intrigued me. Maybe my history is off, my American history. But the Constitution was passed in 1787, written, and then approved 1789. Since then, how many places in the world have adopted a constitution exactly like ours?
I don't know. A lot of South American countries, I think. No?
Not exactly like ours.
No.
And that makes you wonder. I mean, you had this tremendous success. You got to be the most powerful nation in the world. People predicted you would never make it. They predicted it when you had the Civil War. They said, it's over now. When you got to the Depression, it's over now. We went right through those calamities, survived them. We're now unquestionably the most powerful nation in world history. Made up of people who were called a rabble, like my mother and father, who were immigrants, who were never educated, a laborer and a woman with no skill. But you take all those people and we had this fantastic success. Why wouldn't you borrow our Constitution and say, look, those were the rules they used, let's do the same thing? It's interesting,
It's an interesting question. How has England done?
That nobody's done as well as we have, you know, that. But everybody's
human
law.
and civil rights. I don't follow very often, but I understand that they have a, they're pretty liberal and rational people.
I am sure that many other countries have achieved a level of civility comparable to ours.
I'll tell you who has.
With different laws.
Costa Rica has.
Well, Costa Rica is heaven. I mean, because of no army. Costa Rica is
and they follow the United States, basically.
Well, I don't know, but they have the sweetest people and the nicest people. And I think there's something about the fact that they don't have an army that contributes to that. I mean, it's a kind of implicit declaration against that kind of stupid bellicosity. They know that defense is always intelligent, but being reminded that you need a defense against other human beings who will come in and murder you for whatever political reason, there's something depressing about that. And if you could get rid of the notion by saying, hey, look, we don't even need a defense because here, everybody's beautiful. I mean, I love the place.
How do you read Justice Thomas, who's an African American? How do you read that? He's so conservative.
I try to avoid reading he is what he is. There are plenty of conservative African Americans. I mean, intelligent. He's an intelligent person. I mean, not as intelligent as Scalia, perhaps, but he's an intelligent man, and he's a lawyer, and he's conservative. That's the way he sees things. Ward Connerly is a very intelligent man, African American, who sees the affirmative action as a kind of insult to him. So he's
was it Justice Black who was a Ku Klux Klaner, and then he went to the bench?
Right. And
what a metamorphosis in that man, no?
Well, that's happened an awful lot in the Supreme Court, and that's been one of the salvations of the Supreme Court, because every president has done it wrong. Every president has tried to put on the bench not a great judge like Leon Charney, just go and be objective, you're going to be a great judge. No. But somebody who's going to do what I want. I'm the president. I want this result, and that's what I expect you to deliver.
Which is the beauty of giving a lifetime...
Exactly, but it doesn't work out that way, because even if you think Charney's going to be here, David Souter.
Right.
David Souter, appointed by a Republican, and they all thought he was going to be conservative, etc. He's bright, nimble, subtle, and his own person. Everybody knows that. Even O'Connor, I guess. O'Connor has surprised us, too. Kennedy, on the other hand, is more conservative than I thought he was going to be.
All right, Mario, when I say the word or the name George Bush, what happens? How do you feel? What does that do to you?
George Bush. George Bush
Jr.
Now you said George W. Bush.
George W. Bush.
Well,
we could start with George Bush.
Okay.
It's interesting, too.
George Bush. When you say that, it reminds me some kids just won't listen. Here's what I mean. George Bush said about supply side, which was Reagan's idea, we'll cut the taxes for all the rich people and everybody else will get rich, right? He says that's voodoo economics. And he was right, because Reagan wound up raising the taxes after his big tax cut 6 times and wound up with the biggest deficit and the biggest debt in world, not American, world history up until that time. George Bush was correct. George W. Bush didn't listen to his father. Now he's done the same thing. Very, very big tax cuts, followed by huge deficits, and this is economic voodoo. His father said so. He didn't listen to his father. 200 million people at least are suffering as a result.
And what about his Commander-in-Chief performance?
Commander-in-Chief. You know, the big plus that George Bush has politically, George W. Bush, is 9/11 and his being commander-in-chief, 9/11, like Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah.
That's the big plus in their career. Okay, let's look at 9/11 and the war against terrorism that resulted from 9/11. It was fought with great armed forces who absolutely destroyed the opponents. Took a little bit longer than we wanted it to, but they got it done. Who put that army together? Not George W. Bush. You know, in 1991, after we defeated Iraq in that war, Cheney called President Reagan, the previous president. He was then Secretary of Defense, and he congratulated President Reagan and thanked him for giving them the armed forces that they used against the Iraqis. Why?
Cheney was secretary for Reagan or George Bush?
For George Bush.
In the Gulf
But he
War.
called
I
Reagan
see.
to thank Reagan, the previous president, for the armed forces.
I gotcha.
Why didn't they call Clinton? These were his armed forces. Clinton put this Army, Navy, because Bush didn't have the time to. So our commander-in-chief, George W. Bush, he's the commander-in-chief, you just give him credit. That's the way politics is. You're there when the good things happen, we give you credit. You're there when the lousy things happen, we blame you. We blamed George Bush for the economy. He didn't do it. He was there at the time. So George W. Bush now has the advantage of Clinton's armed forces. Why don't they admit that? Tommy Franks was appointed by President Clinton. So, number one, he's the commander-in-chief. Does he deserve credit? Yes. Does the Army and Navy and even more? Good. They were Clinton's. Now, I said this on Hannity and Combs, and Sean Hannity said, but Clinton cut the defense budget. I says he gave you great armed forces at a discount.
Yeah, why not? That's no argument.
Yeah, and then 9/11. You say 9/11, that's immediately a credit for the current commander-in-chief, George Bush, because people say 9/11, he's fighting terrorism. 9/11 said something else. It said that people are at their very best, were at their very best in 9/11, Americans, who rushed into the flames trying to save other human beings they didn't even know, and some of them losing their lives in the effort. People, common people, coming to the aid of other people. That is humanity at its best. People helping people. That's the essential democratic principle. People helping people. And with your tax cut, with your social programs, if you do tax cuts that overwhelmingly give me and my clients benefits and leave out 150 million people who are averaging $42,000 a year and having trouble keeping up with health care and all the other problems, that's not people helping people. So 9/11 can be a great source of comfort in terms of rationalizing your position politically in 2004 to the Democrats as well as to George W. Bush.
I'll give you a march in history. You remember when the World Trade Center was bombed and you were governor?
I do.
I was supposed to be at a meeting in your office at 11 o'clock because you were putting together then the New York-Israeli Economic Partnership. I happened to be in Miami Beach, and the weather was good. So I called your former, whatever she was, secretary or chief of the staff, Kellen Conowitz, and I said, I'm not coming in today, and maybe I can make up with it. Well, you know, I said, I can't do it, that's it, I'm not coming. That was the day of the first bomb. Were you in the building then?
I was on my way there. What a day.
I remember that. Now it brought it back to me now. Wow.
You know, and on this point, that place was engulfed in flames in 1993. We had a pregnant woman in her 8th month. One of the workers on our floor, we were on the
56th.
7th floor.
Seventh,
I think
maybe.
it was 57th floor. One of the workers and a Consolidated Edison guy and one of our employees carried her down 57 flights of stairs. In the dark, not knowing what was happening, just carried her down. And that's what happens in crises, and that's the beauty.
That's the human,
I mean, that
human
is the beauty,
aspects.
that people helping people. That should be the democratic
We
idea.
got a cut. We'll come right back with Mary Cuomo. By the way, are there many Italian firemen? I always see Irish firemen. I never see many Italians.
Yeah, but they're the battalion chiefs.
We'll be
No,
right
I'm
back.
just kidding, just kidding.
The Leon Charney Report congratulates the team of BDC, The Price of Peace, and Leon Charney on the New York Emmy Awards win. The documentary reveals the true story of the negotiations leading up to the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time, the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt. Watch it on Hulu.com or buy the special feature edition DVD at select stores.
Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD in Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Mole Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs in Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.
We're back. I'm speaking with Mario Cuomo, the former governor of New York. He just told me a story about Mickey Mantle, who called him Cuomo, all right? Cuomo. Mario was a baseball player in the minor leagues and had a great career, signed by Branch Rickey, if you remember that name. He was a guy who did a lot for baseball, and especially on a humanitarian basis, right? And unfortunately, he got hit 3-2 on August 17th. See, I remember the conversation.
That's right.
And it ended your career. Do you think you would have gone to the majors, Mario?
No, I don't think that I was that good. Although I did get $2,000, and Mickey Mantle got $1,100.
That goes into the books.
But I was introduced once, and as a matter of fact, I was down in Florida by a guy who said, told the story about me getting beamed and having a blood clot on the brain. He says, and the residual effects of the hematoma eventually drove him into politics. Which may be the explanation.
You know, something you said before is very true. I think I told it to you, maybe not, but it's important. Robert Gates, who was head of the CIA, wrote a book saying that the man who really brought down the Iron Curtain was Jimmy Carter and not Ronald Reagan. And he did it with his human rights policy. And that's really what stirred it. And he's apolitical, by the way. Gates was sort of a civil servant who elevated and got up there, you know, just on merit. And he said in his book, and he wrote it, that Carter, if I tell that story publicly, no one wants to believe me. They all love Ronald Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan, as you said, put us into the greatest deficit in the world. Why is it? What makes him so lovable? No one has dissected his policy. What is it that the public still follows that?
Well, I think it's a whole combination of things, and we're all the victims of circumstance. We really are. There are very few great people who got great by reversing adverse circumstances entirely. And look at the circumstances that attended Reagan and the circumstances that attended Carter. President Reagan came at exactly the right time for President Reagan. A loss of perceived efficacy in the country. They grabbed the hostages. We couldn't get the hostages back. That was interpreted as a sign of weakness of our country, and it frightened our country and made us angry. double-digit inflation.
Interest rates were 21%. This
Now,
fella Khan was
and
running
now,
around.
but as you know, that's the cumulative effect of many years of activity before Carter. But that all happened while Carter was there. And those are the circumstances he had to live with. Now, there are some people, as you know, who said that the hostage deal that Reagan was eventually able to make, that
I was involved with that.
All
I
right,
can
so
tell you.
that was done
There was a
deliberately.
book, and I'm going to give you this story. I went to see Jimmy Carter on this because Gary Sick wrote a book about it. And there was some innuendo there that there was maybe a fix between, who knows, Bechtel, not Bechtel.
Right.
I don't want to name names here because
Right.
I don't want to get sued. I don't know where the fix came, but it seemed very coincidental that on the day that Ronald Reagan was inaugurated, Jimmy Carter was taking Air Force Two to free hostages. And when I talked to Carter, Carter had sent me to meet with Bruno Kreisky. Bruno Kreisky was the Chancellor of Austria, and he had some relationship with the PLO. Arafat offered us a deal saying that if we, the United States, would recognize the PLO, he'd free the hostages in 2 weeks. So Carter said to me, go to Israel immediately and check this out with Weitzman and everybody. I fly to Weitzman, flying there on a private plane. I'll never forget this. There's a Nazi pilot from Austria flying me, and I'm listening to Sinatra playing Strangers in the Night. I arrive at 12 o'clock. Weitzman meets me at the airport. He says, tomorrow morning you come. We have a general staff meeting with all the generals to see what the feelings are. And A, we'll tell you whether you can do a Entebbe type raid, and B, what we think about Arafat. When I got to that staff meeting, I think it's the only time an American attended such a meeting. They said if you tell Carter that he can recognize the PLO, we're out of Camp David. That's it. It's over. Carter says fly back to a secret house they have where you can communicate to the situation. Or I fly back to Austria. Milton Wolff is the ambassador then to Austria. And even he couldn't get this, some secret place where you can talk to the presidents. I get him on the phone. I said, Mr. President, no one believes Arafat. A. B, if you do anything with Arafat, Camp David's over. He says, thank you. I got the message. It was over. And when I went to see Carter, and he said to me, Leon, I don't want to believe, as an American president, I'll never forget this, sitting in Miss Lillian's house in Plains, Georgia, with his cowboy boots. I don't want to believe that story as an American president.
Well, I'm not surprised Carter would speak that way and react that way. But has this story been written somewhere? I apologize for not having read it anywhere. Have you?
Yeah, I think I put it in one of my books, but it's a great story.
It is.
It really is.
It's worth telling again.
Story.
But see, the circumstances, and now Reagan, then the personal circumstances. He is marvelously benign looking and sounding, and he has the image. He has the image of the good guy. How many times in the movies did he fall in love with Jane Wyman only to have her marry Tyrone Power or somebody else, and he winds up the best man and wishes them well? He was never a sore loser. He was Newt Rockney. He was all sorts of good people. And so he's a handsome man and a wonderful deliverer of the message, circumstances. And he comes with a formula. Now here's a tired country, a nervous country, losing confidence, and he comes with the formula. Here was the formula. I'm going to pile the missiles so high that the Ruskies are going to surrender. I'm going to put that much money and make us the strongest military in the world, the way we should be, to
Star
fight
one,
them.
Star two.
Number 2, I'm going to give you the biggest tax cut you ever saw. Number 3, I'm going to balance the budget in 3 years. How do I do that after I spend all this money on defense and give you this huge tax cut? The magic of supply side, what George Bush called it economic voodoo, and he was right. When I give all the rich investors this money in tax cuts, they will put it in the economy. The economy will spin so fast that we'll make more money in the long run than we lost. Pure joke. Ridiculous. But the people loved it. Why? It sounded so right. It was so easy to believe, and they were so eager to believe it. They believed it. And they didn't know until after it was all over that they wound up with the biggest deficit and debt. A lot of people to this day who lived through those years, which I remember so well because I was the governor and I paid a big price in New York for his tax cuts because he cut us at the local level, and taxes had to go up at the local level all over the United States to make up for his tax cut. What people don't remember is he raised taxes 6 times after that, and he raised your payroll tax, Social Security, etc. Nobody knew it.
He also changed the tax law, if I
Yeah,
recall.
nobody knew. In 1986,
Right.
the real estate, the passive losses,
Right,
etc.
right.
Nobody knew any of that stuff. All they knew was the benign, good-looking brown. And then the wall comes down eventually in '89, but before that it's clear that the Soviets are through. So the coincidence was wonderful. He said he was going to frighten them with his missiles. They were losing. Reagan did it. Reagan didn't do it. What did it was American tourists, basketball players who were coming back from the United States saying, hey, you can make $200,000 playing basketball in the United States. Now it's 20 million. And people waiting online, watching television, seeing Americans on television living like lords, and they're waiting online for a bottle of vodka or 5 pounds of potatoes. How long are you going to keep
herring.
communism? So you know, it came down, Paul Kennedy has written great books on this. It came down not because of the military. It came down because of the economy. They went broke, the Soviets, and their system went broke, and the people understood it. But circumstance. To this day, people will tell you that the Reagan tax cuts are what started our prosperity. Are you kidding? The best years were from 97 till 2000, 96 till 2000, say. Reagan tax cut was in 1982. Then he had 6 tax increases. Then Bush had a tax increase. Then Clinton had a tax increase. Then you had the boom. And you're telling me that that original tax cut, after all, you know, how do you explain that? You can't. Or well, then what is it? Circumstance. He was beautiful. He said the right thing. He gave you a big tax cut. The Soviets
He was
lost.
photogenic. He was great on television.
He's wonderful.
People loved when he spoke.
Wonderful.
And you know, he was great for the economy of comics.
President Clinton was there. What would have happened if President Clinton didn't have those 4 years of binge in the stock market? Remember where he was just
course.
before? What would have happened to Rudy Giuliani if he hadn't been in town at the time that 9/11 occurred? Because before 9/11, he was not doing well at all. We all report.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And if it hadn't been that he was in town for that terrible disaster and was able to show his magnificent leadership capacity, which he did, 4 or 5 days, whatever it was, and he deserves whatever you give him now. But that's circumstance that put him in that place at that moment. And that's the explanation for most failures. And look, when you name the great presidents, who is it? Roosevelt. Why Roosevelt?
Economics,
Because he was there
Depression.
for the Depression,
Right.
because he was there for the Second World War.
Right.
Who else do you
Lincoln.
name? Lincoln. Why? Civil War.
And Civil War was based upon a lot of economics. Most people don't know that. A friend of mine, Asa Weissman, is reading a big book on the Civil War now. He said it's not so much about the freedom of slavery, it's about economics. Interesting. How's Bloomberg doing, in your opinion, here in New York?
I think Mike Bloomberg, he has to be the smartest or one of the smartest human beings we ever had as a mayor because he's super intelligent. He has to be as competent as anybody we ever had as mayor. Of course, he's got great competence. He made $5 billion by putting together businesses in a private corporation. He didn't borrow your money or my money to do it. So he's very, very talented. What about the decisions he made? He made the only decisions basically he could make. He didn't create the problems. He had to make them. Well, then why isn't he more popular? His personality hasn't caught on yet. People haven't been convinced that he feels their pain. He hadn't been
That's
convinced that
true.
he really understands.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, does he? Of course he does, or he wouldn't have given up everything to come and help us. But he hasn't yet developed the knack of communicating that feeling. Koch had it, you know, Rudy had
Rudy
it,
had it, yeah.
John Lindsay had it.
You had it.
Well, he still has to develop that aspect of his personality. You know, that being more at ease with people. Maybe more town meetings would help. I don't know, but that's it's all just the perception of his personality. Talk about circumstance.
It's interesting now with Pataki. He's into his third term. You did 3 terms too, and then you ran for 4th. Do people get tired no matter what happens?
Absolutely. I lost by 3 points to Pataki in 1994. But the exit polls, when asked, how did he do over the last 12 years as governor, I got 60% approval. And then I got 43% in the vote for a 4th term. Well, if you 60% you approve of what he did, then what? Enough already. What do you want to be, Benito Mussolini? You've been here for 12 years. Now all of a sudden, you want to be, go already. We're tired. And then the death penalty didn't. The death penalty really hurt me in the last term. Because there were a lot of people who gave me a pass on that issue. I was against the death penalty, and that was an unpopular position to take. And they gave me a pass, but at one point, so they got tired. It was enough already. An exit poll said something like 7.5% of the people held the death penalty against me. Then there was that guy Grasso, who was a murderer, and that happened just at the time of the election.
We're out of time, Mary. I'm sorry to say. I'm having
My
a ball.
pleasure. Thank
you got any predictions for the Democratic nomination?
We'll have a candidate.
You had it from Mario Cuomo. What a pleasure. We'll see you next week. It won't be as intellectually piercing, but we'll do the best we can.